Chapter 2, Conceptualizing Culture. What culture is and what is culture isn't. So, first off, before we get right into the chapter of what ties, connect human cultures, we should know what culture means and what culture does not mean. So, uh, the definition of culture is that anthropologists and sociologists define culture in different ways. First off, Edward B.Taylor defined culture as a complex whole which includes knowledge, beliefs of art, and morals and law and customs, and any other capabilities and habits acquiring by man as a member of society. And B. Malinowski has defined culture as cumulative creation of man. And Roberts says culture is the complex whole that consists of everything we think and do have as a member of society. Uh, Therefore, culture is a moral, intellectual, and a spiritual discipline for advancement in accordance with the norms and values based on the accumulated heritage. Culture also can be defined as a collective heritage learned learned by individuals and passed from generation to generations. So, what could be the characteristics or features of culture? First off, characteristic features of culture. Culture is learned. So culture is not transmitted genetically. It is rather is acquiring through the process of learning or interacting with one's environment. The process of acquiring culture after we born is called inculturation, or which means inculturation is the specifically defined as the process by which an individual learns rules and values of one's culture. So this should be highlighted. Inculturation means of learning, basically means learning culture. After when your birth, you will be in the process of learning languages, custom systems, everything about what your environment have incultured throughout time. You will be inculturated to learn those specific things. So the second feature of culture is that culture is shared. Without shared culture, members of society would be unable to communicate and cooperate, and confusion and disorder world result. The third one, culture is also symbolic. Culture is also symbolic. So, when we say by symbolic, through its unique and crucial to humans and cultural learning. A symbol is something verbal or non-verbal within a particular language or culture that comes to stand for something else. And culture, the fourth one is culture is all encompassing. So how is all culture all encompassing? Culture is the sum of total human creation, intellectual, technical, artistic, physical, and moral. It is complex patterns of living that direct human lives. Culture is encompasses all aspects which affects people in their everyday lives. So culture is all. When you say culture is that is it is all encompassing, it means it is not only about a specific culture that is followed. It is about everything that a community or a society can follow as a culture, which are their way of systems, their languages, their dresses, everything that includes on how that a specific culture or society can differ from others. So culture is also integrated. Culture, when you say culture is integrated, cultures are not absurd. Cultures are not absurd collections of custom and beliefs. Instead, culture should be taught as integrated wholes, the parts of which some degree are interconnected with one another. The sixth one is culture can be adaptive and maladaptive. When we say culture can be adaptive and maladaptive, is that besides our biological means of adaptation, we also use culture adaptive kits, which contain customary activities and tools that aid us. Sometimes adaptive behaviors that offer short-term benefits to a particular subgroups or individuals may harm the environment and threaten the group's long-term survival. The seventh one is culture is dynamic. When you say culture is dynamic, is that there are no cultures that remain completely static. So when you say culture is dynamic, it means that culture is changing constantly as new ideas and new techniques are added to time, past modify or changing the old ways. So these are the seven main features, characteristic features of culture. So let's revise them real quick. The first off, we have culture is learned, uh, culture is shared, culture is symbolic, culture is all-encompassing, culture is integrated, culture can be adaptive and maladaptive, and culture is dynamic. So, what are the aspects or elements of culture? So, uh, two of the most basic aspects of culture are material and non-material culture. As we can understand that the material ones are materialistics and non-material ones are symbolic or untouchables. So material culture consists of man-made objects such as tools, implements, furnitures, automobiles, buildings, dams, roads, bridges, which have been changed by the and used by man. Non-material cultures are consist of the words the people use, the language they speak, the beliefs they hold, the values and virtues they cherish, the habits they follow, the rituals they practice, and the that they do, and the ceremonies that they observe. And it also includes our custom, taste, attitude, and outlook in beliefs and ways of acting, feeling, and thinking. So these are non-material cultures. So aspects of non-material. So when we go deep on the aspects of non-material cultures, we have values, beliefs, and norms. So when we come to values, our values are standards by which the members of society define what is good or bad, what is beautiful and ugly. What values are central aspects of the non-material culture of society. So if you are asked what are the central aspects of non-material culture of society, you can say they are values. So the second aspect of non-material culture is beliefs. Beliefs, as the name describes, beliefs are cultural conventions that concern true or false assumptions and specific descriptions of the nature of the universe and the humanity in place and humanity's place in it. So their beliefs. So what humans are here for, who created humans, the descriptions of humans, and everything in between is characterized as a belief of non-material. Uh, the third one is norms. Norms are shared rules or guidelines that define how people ought to behave under certain circumstances. So the these norms are rules and guidelines. You can highlight that norms are rules and guidelines, and beliefs are assumptions of true or false of specific description of nature and the universe So beliefs are cultural conventions, and values are standards by which member of society define what is good or bad. So values about good or bad, and beliefs are about true or false, and norms are rules and guidelines on which member of the culture or the member of the society ought to behave in a certain circumstances. So norms vary in terms of their importance to a culture, and these are so norms can also vary in terms of their cultures. It could be different from culture to culture. The first one it could be different with is the folk way. The folk way, norms guiding all usage and conventions of everyday life are known as folkways. So this is our folkways is about everyday lives. Folkways are norms that are not strictly enforced. They are not strictly enforced, such as not leaving your seat for an elderly people inside a bus or a taxi. This is not enforced, but it is assumed that you should, but it is not enforced. So the basic character of folkway is that it is not strictly enforced. The second term that differs norms is mores. Mores is pronounced mores are much stronger norms than folkways. These are much stronger norms than folkways, which folkways are not majorly strictly enforced, but mores are norms that are believed to be essential to core values. We insist on conformity. A person who steals, rapes, kills have violated some society's most important morals. So the difference between folkway and morals is folkway is not strictly enforced, but it is considered as a culture or a thing that you should do it, but it is not enforced on you. But mores is strictly enforced on you on not doing a specific thing or doing a specific thing. So culture is universal and general and particular. So culture unity and variations are that culture is universal, it is general and particular. So in studying human diversity in time and space, and anthropologists distinguish among the universal, the generalized, and the particular. So when we say culture is universal, or culture's universality means universals are culture traits that span across all cultures. So this is universal is all about all cultures. A great example of universality is whether in Africa or Asia, Australia or Antarctica, people understand the universal concept of family. When we say culture is general, or the generality of culture, well, the generality of culture, generalities are culture traits that occur in many societies, but not all of them. So it minuses on some societies or cultures, but it is general in major ones, or it is not like major ones, but in most of the cultures in the world. For example, society can share the same belief customs because of borrowing, domination, or colonial rules. Example includes farming, nuclear family, parents, and children. Particularity means that when we say culture is particular, that it is traits of culture that it is not widespread culture. Borrowing traits once limited are more widespread useful traits that don't clash with current culture. Borrowed culture traits are modified marriage, parenthood, death, puberty, birth, all celebrated differently. We can vary culture, a specific culture to another by ethnocentrism, cultural relativism, and human rights. So when we define ethnocentrism refers to the tendency to see the behaviors, beliefs, values, and the norms of one's own group. So, ethnocentrism is the tendency to see the behaviors, beliefs, and values and norms of one's own group. It is on one's own group as the only right way. So, uh, living and judge others by those standards. So, intercentrism is the result of prejudice about people from other cultures and rejection of their alien ways. So, it is intercentrism basically means saying uh, your culture is the right way and other cultures are doing it wrong because your culture is the one doing it right. The second one is cultural relativism. Cultural relativism is the concept of cultural relativism is states that cultures differ so that a culture, traits, acts, and idea has no meaning, but its meaning only within cultural settings. So, cultural relativism suspends its judgment and views about behavior of people from the perspective of their own culture. Every society has its own culture, which is more or less unique. Respects of cultural differences involves appreciating cultural diversities, accepting and respecting other cultures, and trying to understand every culture and its element in terms of its own context and language. So, and also accepting that each body of custom has inherent dignity and meaning as the way of life in, of one group which has worked out to its environment, to biologically needs to its members, and to the group's relationships. The third one being human rights. Human rights, the idea of human rights challenges cultural relativism by invoking a realm of justice and morality beyond superior to the laws of customs and particular countries, cultures, and religions. Human rights includes the right to speak freely, to hold religious beliefs without persecution, and to not be murdered, injured, or enslaved, imprisoned, or without charge. Such rights are seen inalienable. Nations cannot abridge or terminate them, and international, larger than, superior to individual nations and cultures. Anthropologists respect human diversity. Most ethnographers try to be objective, accurate, and sensitive in their accounts of their of other cultures. So, in conclusion, we can see that the three differences that it is ethnocentrism is saying only one culture is right, and cultural relativism is saying uh, that every culture is respected and right in their own ways. But human right, when you come to human rights, is it respects the cultural relativism, but it the human rights of people. If a specific culture denies the free of speech or any different types of human rights, that it should not be or there should be a change in that culture. That's what it means. So the differences are here. So the fourth one and the last one is culture change. When you come to culture change, when you examine a history of society, it is obvious that its culture has changed over time. Some of the shared behaviors and ideas that were common at one time are modified or replaced to another time at another time. Culture change can occur uh, as a result of the following mechanisms. So, what are the mechanisms that could make a culture change? The first one, so mechanisms, first is diffusion. Diffusion, the process by which cultural elements are borrowed from another society and incorporated into the culture of the recipient group, is called diffusion. So, diffusion is direct, forced, and indirect. So basically what diffusion means is that cultural elements are borrowed from another society and incorporated into the culture of the recipient. So this comes from society, from another society. So diffusion can be direct. When we say diffusion can be direct, when we say diffusion can be direct, is diffusion when two cultures trade with in we when we say diffusion is direct, is when two cultures trade with intermarry among, or wage or war on one or into one another. Diffusion, when we say diffusion is forced, is when one culture subjugates another and imposes its custom on the dominated group. So when we say culture is also indirect, means items or traits move from group A to group C via group B without any first-hand contact between A and C. So it is different from diffusion to the direct, which makes is the indirect, that this is between group A. When we say culture is direct, it is between group A and group B. But when we say culture is indirect, it is between group A and B and also C, which makes it group A and C. Culture can change by also acculturation. Acculturation, when we say acculturation, it means that the cultures of either or both groups may be changed by this contact. This usually happens in situations of trade and colonialism. The third way in which culture could change is inventions. The process by which human innovates creatively, finding solutions to problems, is a third mechanism of culture change. Faced with comparable problems and challenges, people in different societies have innovated and changed. The fourth one being globalization. The term globalization encompasses a series of processes including diffusion and so ties that connect marriage, family, and kinship. So first off, let's define what marriage is. Uh, Almost all known society recognize marriage. The ritual of marriage marks a change in status of a man and a woman, and the acceptance by society of the new family and that it is formed. The term marriage is not an easy term to define. For years, anthropologists have attempted to define this term in such a way to cover all known societies. Frequently, anthropologists have debated whether or not families and institutions of marriage are universals. So, what are the rules of marriage? So,